BBOR, Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia at heart and from around the globe. In 2007, Madeleine McCann went missing. She was 3 years old at the time, but she was just shy of her 4th birthday, and this became perhaps the most famous missing persons investigation in the world. And there's a suspect in the disappearance of Madeleine McCann named Christian Brueckner. That is not his real name, it's an alias, and he has his identity protected under German privacy laws. Sometimes he's simply referred to as Christian B. And he's back in the news because of some other legal charges that are not directly linked to the Madeleine McCann case, although they are indirectly linked. And I first learned about Christian Brueckner as a suspect in her disappearance, and yes, he has been accused of not only abducting her, but also murdering her, and I've never liked him as a suspect, and I'll share some reasons why throughout the duration of this recording, and I am going to be citing some news articles, but I also want to give credit to Sky News because they really try to share lots of coverage around the recent developments in this story, and they are all over YouTube with their news clips. And I was really quite surprised that Google was only showing older news articles. It really took a while to get something that was a little bit more recent. But who is Christian Brueckner, and how does he get connected to the story? Let's start out with People magazine. This case sparked a media frenzy that initially painted Madeleine's parents, Jerry and Kate McCann, as suspects, after forensic tests found traces of their daughter's blood in the car they rented 25 days after she went missing. Well, if that's not a big red flag, I don't know what is. They maintained their innocence until they were officially cleared in 2008. Well, Jerry and Kate may have been officially cleared in the minds of many, but in the minds of many others, they are still the prime suspects, and also officially cleared is not necessarily going to detract people in the general public from thinking that they're guilty. But now we're going to get to Christian Brueckner. In 2020, German prosecutors named Christian Brueckner as a suspect in Madeleine's disappearance. 2 years later, Portuguese prosecutors confirmed to the Associated Press that they had identified an official suspect in the case but did not reveal a name. And I remember when the news coverage happened in 2020, people were sharing these articles around that there was a German suspect that had been named in the disappearance of Madeleine McCann. And I want to be very clear with you guys. One of the biggest reasons why I had doubts is the way that the story was presented. They didn't say that they had identified the killer. They didn't say that they had physical evidence to support this claim. They didn't say anything like they were pressing charges or he was going to be arrested and booked for the murder of Madeleine McCann. And the media loves red herrings. They love to set up these spectacles and they create the media circus. That's why we call it that. That's why we have that term. And I remember a quotation from Vinnie Politan on Court TV when he was telling the story of John Mark Carr, the teacher in Thailand who confessed to murdering JonBenet Ramsey. What he said was, when John Mark Carr was brought back to the United States to be booked for the murder of JonBenet Ramsey, to be investigated, I should say, investigated, it was the biggest day in the history of court TV. And he's like, bigger than any of the other cases that might come to mind. He said that was the biggest day in the history of court TV. The media loves to run wild with these suspects, whether they are legitimate or not. But anyway, why would people be suspecting this guy? Well, Christian Brueckner was convicted in 2019 for raping a 72-year-old woman, and he has denied any involvement with the missing toddler. And this is from a German prosecutor named Hans Christian Wolters. My private opinion is that he relatively quickly killed the girl, Madeleine McCann, possibly abused her, and then killed her. Well, how do we get everything connected? So let's just keep going here because we need to look at not only what was going on, but like, why did this happen? Well, in 2007, Jerry, Kate, and their 3 children were staying at the resort in Praia de Luz, Portugal. The family was visiting from the United Kingdom where they resided and rented a vacation apartment in the resort town of Praia de Luz. On May 3rd, the parents put their kids to bed and had dinner with friends at a restaurant less than 200 feet away. They left the apartment unlocked so they could periodically check on their kids. And a lot of people are asking, why did they do that? Well, the resort in Praia de Luz had what was called a night creche, which appears to be like a type of daycare, but for the nighttime, night care for children. And the reason why the McCanns did not want to use that, reportedly, was because they didn't like the timing. They had to bring the kids in too early and they had to pick them up too late. So they wanted to use this system of checking where every 30 minutes someone from their dining group would go out to check their kids. They wouldn't check all the kids, as it's been reported, but they would check on their own kids or maybe one or two others. And this group was known as the Top of Seven. And to this day, it's quite shocking. It's a bizarre arrangement. And it created a vulnerability. It created this opportunity for a predator to attack Madeleine McCann, or created an opportunity for Madeleine to experience some type of danger in the apartment that could have been a result of the parents. Last week on this Tuesday segment, I was talking about how Madeleine may have died as a result of sleep aid drugs and disorientation, and that is another theory. And yes, this is a regular segment that I do about Madeleine McCann every Tuesday here on Black Box Online Radio, and if you want to follow along, you can hit the like button and subscribe. It really helps out the channel, and you can also check out some of the other content here on BBOR. I talk about the Zodiac Killer, Jack the Ripper, the Black Dahlia, and D.B. Cooper, and I've done Jean-Benet Ramsey in the past. So who is Christian Brueckner? According to the Times, he was born in 1976, adopted as a baby, but his adoptive parents allegedly sent him away. He was later taken in by Brigitte Brückner and Fritz Brückner in Würzburg, Germany, where he grew up. In 1993, he started committing sexual offenses against children and was caught molesting a 6-year-old girl on a playground. Brückner was extradited from Portugal to Germany in 2017, where he spent 15 months in jail for sexually abusing a child and was sentenced to 7 years in prison for raping a 72-year-old woman in 2005. Alright, so there are some points here that are defendable. I told you guys that I did not necessarily think that he was a strong suspect, but there are some defendable points. He is a sex offender who had connections to the area. One thing that I don't see them stating very clearly is the reason for initial suspicion. Other than that, apparently there's some secret reason why he was suspected, but he's a sex offender in the area who targeted children. Even if somebody is just absolutely gung-ho for this theory involving the parents, they think that Jerry and Kate were responsible, this guy still should have been checked out. This guy still should have been investigated. Any sex offender that would have been in the area or had some connections to the area should have been investigated. And I do mean that. Even if somebody had just recently been in Praia de Luz, maybe they overstayed their visit and they lied about their whereabouts, something to that effect. Of course, you should look into somebody like this, but one of the major points that I just have to come back to is when they're sharing these types of media descriptions, they're saying things about his previous offenses, not about the hard evidence. Like, where is the hard evidence that is actually saying that he committed this specific crime? Where is the hard evidence that he actually murdered Madeleine McCann? Where is the hard evidence that supports that German prosecutor's claim that he abducted her, killed her relatively quickly, and he disposed of her remains? And I'm just not seeing it. In February of 2024, he went to trial in Germany for 3 counts of rape and 2 counts of sexual abuse of a child that he allegedly committed in Portugal between 2000 and 2017. And his alleged victims include an elderly woman, a 14-year-old girl, and a 20-year-old Irish woman. And I've also noticed that Madeleine was younger than any of his victims. It appears that his youngest victim was 6 years old, and his oldest victim was 72 years old. So that seems that he is going after victims all across the spectrum. So going after a 3-year-old girl who was just days shy of her 4th-year-old birthday does not seem beyond belief. And I do admit it, that's a reasonable point. That's a point for suspicion. That's not a point for conviction. And I know, if you've listened this far into the episode, absolutely, you actually want to know what happened to Madeleine McCann. Not just, well, this person has a checkered past. This person has a terrible past, actually. This guy is a sex offender. He's a rapist. And, I mean, I I just have absolutely nothing nice to say in any way. And there is a recent article that came out only 2 days ago called "Who is Christian Brueckner? Chief Madeleine McCann Suspect Refuses Met Police Interview." This is by Andy Wells, Rose McGinnis, and Ellen Manning, just citing the source. And this is one that is why he was mentioned on Sky News so frequently recently. And they're saying this because he had an opportunity to be interviewed by the Metropolitan Police, and he refused. And I don't think that has any significance in relation to his guilt. I don't think that that means that he is guilty if he refused to be interviewed by the police. Even if someone were innocent, they would want to refuse the interview from the police because it's just going to create more havoc in their life. And also, you have to remember that people might act on the advice from attorneys. Attorneys are completely against that stuff, talking to the police, interrogations. And even if it's not even related to Madeleine McCann, what if he admits to something that would incriminate himself in some other incident, which probably he has based on his record. But this article is called "Who is Christian Brueckner?" and it is going to be talking more about some of the contemporary events. Christian Brueckner was named by German prosecutors in 2020 as the prime suspect in Madeleine's disappearance, but has not been charged and denies any involvement. Madeleine vanished in the Portuguese resort of Praia da Luz in 2007, shortly after she was left sleeping by her parents, Kate and Jerry, who went for dinner nearby. And there are some things, though, that I do want to talk about in relation to the Top of Seven and Jerry and Kate and their system of checking. This is something that has been quoted very frequently on Sky News. Many of their video clips pulled up a passage from Kate McCann's book, Madeleine, and they were talking about how they were ruling out the possibility of an accidental death. Because there was an episode that I really wanted to talk to you guys about for this Tuesday segment, and it's in relation to a variant of the accidental death theory. But what Kate McCann pointed out in her book is that if Madeleine were able to get out of the apartment on her own, let's say she woke up, she's looking for her parents, she went out, she would have to pull a curtain back and then open the back patio door, which was unlocked, but she would still have to open it. Could she have done that? And I was thinking, yes, absolutely. People underestimate what a 3-year-old kid is. I mean, she's not a brand new newborn. 3 years old, she can open a door. Lots of 3-year-olds can open doors. But then she also would have had to have gone through 2 gates. One was like a child protective security gate, and then there was the gate to the apartment resort unit in Praia da Luz. And I'm like, well, yes, she could have opened the gate, the external one. The child safety lock gate, all right, well, maybe. It depends on what we're talking about here. But the real thing that the reporters from Sky News were defending Kate McCann on is that would somebody who's 3 years old open 3 different doors? We have the gate and the second gate and the patio door, and then close them all neatly as if nothing had ever happened. Would they all just perfectly close them back in place? And I do admit that's highly improbable. So if anything, that implicates Kate McCann and makes her look more suspicious, because that's what everybody has been saying for decades, that something bad happened in the apartment in relation to Madeleine's disappearance on behalf of the parents. And I really don't want to make this episode all about them, but that is something that she's trying to argue, that Madeleine didn't wander off and accidentally die. One of the biggest theories is that she wandered off and fell into a construction pit. But that's not even the one I was going to talk to you guys about for this episode, a different variant of the accidental death theory. But what I believe Kate McCann has argued, and I think that this might be a fair assessment and response, that does suggest that that's abnormal behavior for children, to close 3 doors perfectly and neatly as if no one had ever been there. So wouldn't that leave us with 2 different options? Number 1, we have the parents' involvement, and number 2, an abduction. Abducted by an external predator, or predators, plural. Which one do you think is more likely? Which one would you be leaning to? Let's keep going here. The Metropolitan Police said Christian Brueckner remains a suspect in the investigation. Detective Chief Inspector Mark Cranwell, a senior investigating officer for the Met's probe, said that the force will continue to pursue any viable lines of inquiry in the absence of an interview. Okay, well, it seems like they want to keep this guy in the spotlight, but that doesn't mean that he killed her. As of now, I haven't seen anything that would suggest that he has actually committed the murder of Madeleine McCann, other than being a terrible person. Christian Brueckner began his criminal activities at age 15 with a 1992 burglary conviction in Würzburg, Germany, and his record includes over a dozen convictions, notably for sexually abusing youths, and which he served 18 months for as a teenager. In 2019, he was convicted for the 2005 rape of a 72-year-old woman in Praia de Luz, Portugal, for which he is serving 7 years, and a release date is expected for 2025. The rape took place in the same area where Madeleine disappeared while on holiday with her family. Alright, though, so these crimes were years apart, though. The disappearance of Madeleine McCann was in 2007. This one was in 2005. It doesn't diminish the suffering of the victim at all. It's just, I know why they're suspecting this guy, and even if you're going to take away the media circus angle, I know why the police would be suspecting him. I know why they would want to keep him under the light, and he seems like somebody whom they could use to just close one of the largest cases in the world. But did he actually do it? I mean, like, where's the evidence? Where's the story? How does it all fit together? In October of 2024, Christian Brueckner was acquitted of 3 counts of aggravated rape and 2 counts of sexual abuse of children alleged to have happened between 2000 and 2017 in Praia de Luz, Portugal. His defense team pointed to a lack of evidence, but German prosecutors have linked Brueckner to Madeleine's disappearance through phone records, placing him in the area on the evening that she vanished. If they can prove that, that is something strong. A former friend, Helga B., claimed that Christian Brueckner confessed his involvement in Madeleine's disappearance, telling a trial in Germany that Brueckner told him she didn't scream. I mean, people are also horribly unreliable. If that actually happened, that would be something that is going to be worthy of consideration. But you guys know about hearsay. Don't tell me what somebody else told you. It's hearsay, it's not evidence. Judge Judy used to say that all the time. And with this statement here, I mean, we have to verify the validity of that claim, because lots of people come forward. I just told you about John Mark Carr in the JonBenet Ramsey case. Somebody was providing detailed explanations on how he committed the murder, exonerated because of DNA and other evidence. And I do mean that. He had an alibi. However, Christian Brueckner's credibility has been questioned, and Brückner has referred to his claims as not even worthy of comment. The investigation into Madeleine's disappearance is ongoing. German prosecutors say that Brückner spent time in the same part of Portugal, and they have mobile phone data and the sale of a vehicle in the area to link him. Prosecutors claim Bruckner's mobile phone was pinged by a mobile tower in Praia de Luz the night Madeleine disappeared, allegedly showing that he was in the area. And I really hope that this isn't going to try and turn into one of those stories where the authorities are just going to say, well, you know what? We didn't solve the case, but we're going to attribute her death to him. Sometimes they do that in high-profile situations when they want to make a conviction, but they don't have the evidence, so they use an undesirable citizen as a fall guy. They blame him for something because he deserves to be in jail in their minds, and they can't really convict him on hard evidence, or they can't solve the missing persons case, so instead, they just want to close the case by vilifying someone whom they had a grudge against to begin with. And it's even beyond a grudge. I'm not going to lie to you, this guy Christian Brueckner sounds like a terrible person, but did he actually do it? In June of 2025, Portuguese and German police conducted a new search of an area between where Madeleine went missing and the address linked to Brückner, but without a breakthrough. See, that's it. Where's the hard evidence? Chief Prosecutor Hans Christian Wolters told the AFP news agency on September 4th that Brückner remains fundamentally dangerous and predicted that he will leave Germany after being released. Well, absolutely. I think this guy's fundamentally dangerous. If he has had decades, I repeat, decades of criminal behavior where he is targeting people of all different ages. His youngest victim was 6. He went after teenagers. He went after a 72-year-old woman. I mean, lock this person up and never throw away the key. Goodness. In an interview with The Mirror published on September 6, Wolters said that he is hopeful that Bruckner may eventually be charged in relation to Madeleine's disappearance, and that his team is working on the case every day. Every single day, he said, while he refused to rule out more searches. In an interview in August with the BBC, Wolters said, Bruckner is not just our number one suspect, he is the only suspect. Well, this happens all the time where they zone in on somebody, and again, they try to make the case of, all right, this person most likely did it. And this isn't even so much about law enforcement. This is about the media. They're like, this person most likely did it. They just didn't have the evidence to convict him. So many times people get accused of these crimes, whether it's Arthur Lee Allen and the Zodiac Killer mystery, John Bitroff and the Long Island serial killer mystery, a whole list of other people in the Golden State Killer mystery. They try to play this angle of, okay, well, this person wasn't convicted, but most likely they did it. And with the case of John Bitroff and the Long Island serial killer case, it turns out it's a totally different person who wasn't mentioned on any of the public discussion suspect lists. Rex Heuermann, who's now facing trial for the murders, and with DNA links among almost all the murder victims. So, just because the media is going to try and overhype this and make it look like, oh yeah, this guy did it, they just were missing a few pieces of evidence, so he got away. They do this all the time. That is not the equivalent of a conviction. That is not the equivalent of saying, all right, this is who did it, this is how he did it, these are the pieces of physical evidence that support it, the DNA, the fingerprints, the hair fibers, this is where the body has been located. So it sounds like they don't have a lot to go on, other than the fact that he was in the area at the time. Put him under suspicion, absolutely. But I'll believe it when I see it. Okay, and I would actually like to move on to a different article here, although this one was pretty good. And this one comes to us from Oxygen True Crime. And it says, why is the primary suspect in the Madeleine McCann case back in the news? Christian Brueckner was officially named as a suspect in the Madeleine McCann disappearance by the Portuguese prosecutors in 2022. Although, as we have already said, he was a suspect well before that, years before that. A German man who's still considered to be the main suspect in 2007, the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, could be released Wednesday from prison. He's been incarcerated for an unrelated crime. Christian Brueckner, who was officially named as a suspect in the British 3-year-old's disappearance by Portuguese prosecutors, has been serving a 7-year sentence for the rape of a 72-year-old woman. As Bruckner's impending release nears, authorities confirmed that he remains a suspect in Madeleine's disappearance and says he refused to sit down with the British police. What happened to Madeleine McCann? Madeleine disappeared in 2007 while visiting Praia da Luz with her family. Christian Brueckner denies involvement in Madeleine McCann's disappearance. And this is not to say something in his defense, but, well, what should he say? What should he say? Oh yes, I killed her, here's the body. If he has a chance to get away with it, wouldn't he try to get away with it? Why on earth would he make a confession at this point in the game? Let's see, what are his options? Get released from prison and be a free man, or confess to a murder and go back to prison when they don't have the evidence to convict him? You be the judge. Christian Brueckner has never been formally charged and continues to deny any involvement in the young girl's disappearance. The authorities say that Brueckner, who was convicted of past sexual offenses involving the ones with children, was living as a drifter and petty criminal at the time of Madeleine's disappearance. Well, he's not doing himself any favors, although, let's say hypothetically, if Christian Brueckner were innocent and he were in Praia da Luz at the time, there is no way he could have foreseen that Madeleine would have been abducted and he would have been a suspect. There is no way that he could have foreseen that without being the perpetrator or being an active participant. And they told the BBC last month that Brueckner remains the only suspect in the Madeleine McCann case. And I know I'm only sharing this stuff from my experiences as a true crime follower and somebody who watches true crime news, But normally when they say something like this, that means that they don't have the evidence. And that means that they're just trying to make it seem like they're doing the investigation. They might have a completely different suspect behind closed doors. And I'm not making light of that. I'm not downplaying that. They might be doing something else. And they're creating this as a type of media diversion. And I'm saying that to you with 100% sincerity. I've already given you other examples about how the police and the media try to make it seem like they have a prime suspect, but we don't get to know what's going on behind closed doors. And very frequently they name this prime suspect, and it turns out that they are completely unrelated. But it says, though, that we have evidence which speaks against Brückner, which indicates that he is responsible for the disappearance of Madeleine McCann, the prosecutor said, but they did not reveal what that evidence was. And they also said, we haven't found anything in the last 5 years that exonerates Brückner. Well, I mean, you haven't found anything that would truly exonerate a bunch of people in Praia de Luz. I mean, so, okay, well, it just says, we found evidence that strengthens our case, but in our view, it's not strong enough to make a guilty verdict likely. That's why, so far, we couldn't charge him or apply for an arrest warrant. Now, I also want to ask you guys, listeners to this program, does it not sound like this German prosecutor wants to convict this guy as well? He wants to go to trial, and he wants to convict him because he's already decided that that's what side he's going to play, and that's what a prosecutor does. That's how the legal system works. But he's trying to build the case against him. That's his job. Yet he openly states that they don't have enough evidence to convict him. Let me just ask you this. If you've listened this far into the recording, would you find this guy guilty based on everything that you've heard? Sex offender, in the area, cell phone pinging on a tower near the area, he sold a vehicle in the area. Does that mean that he murdered Madeleine McCann? Would you find that person guilty beyond a reasonable doubt? If I were on that jury, I would say absolutely not. Firstly, where's the body? Secondarily, how did the crime occur? Think about some other high-profile cases that we've talked about here on Black Box Online Radio, such as the Casey Anthony trial, the story of Brooke Schuyler Richardson. In both of those instances, they were found not guilty for murdering their daughters because they couldn't determine the cause of death. All right, you think that this guy did it? You think that this guy murdered Madeleine McCann? What was the cause of death? I'm waiting for it. So absolutely this guy would be let go, or he would be exonerated, found not guilty. So that just begs the question of, why create this giant media spectacle if it's not going to go anywhere? What's the deal with vilifying this person in the court of public opinion if you don't have the physical evidence to support it, to support the hypothesis that he committed the murder? And as I said, I just think it's a red herring that is being supported by the media for viewership and ratings and clicks, and a red herring that's being supported by members of law enforcement because they want to just put something out there as a distraction from either the fact that they haven't found the real answer to the story, they haven't located Madeleine, or they haven't found a real perpetrator. What have Madeleine McCann's parents said in recent years about Christian Brueckner? As the years continue to pass without answers, Madeleine's parents remain committed to finding their daughter. The years appear to be passing, and even more quickly, and whilst we have no significant news or information to share, to leave no stone unturned is unwavering, they wrote on their personal website in 2025. They noted that their daughter, whose birthday is in May, would be 22 years old in 2025. We continue to celebrate her as the very beautiful and unique person that she was, and we miss her. And that brings us to the conclusion of that article there. So, my overall take on the subject is, there are reasons to suspect Christian Brueckner. And if there is physical evidence, the prosecutors are not talking. And I don't like the way that this story has been shared in the media. I have lots of doubts. But even though I said that I don't think that he did it, I don't get a prize for being right, and I don't get a penalty for being wrong. If it turns out that I am wrong about everything that I've said in this episode, and it was Christian Brueckner, I would gladly accept the result, because, much like you, I want to know what happened to Madeleine. I want the truth. I think it's a very fair statement right now that there's insufficient evidence to suspect this guy. And I would love your answer to the challenge question. If you were on a jury and you heard the evidence that has been presented in this episode, would you convict him? I would say absolutely not, but I would love to know your responses. And I would also like to let you know that this show is available for free downloads anywhere you get your podcasts, including Spotify and Apple Podcasts, under the names Black Box True Crime or Black Box Podcast. The images that you see going by on the screen are archived at True Crime Designs on Facebook, True Crime Designs. And if you want to support all of the efforts for Black Box Online Radio for putting out shows Monday through Friday, as well as shorts and reels, you can go over to buymeacoffee.com, buymeacoffee.com/blackboxned88, and that allows you to make a donation or contribution to help support the show, and anybody who makes a donation will get a shout-out on Zodiac Monday. And that will be all for me now, and I will see you tomorrow for a new episode about Jack the Ripper, Ripper Wednesday here on BBOR. Until next time.